I didn't plan to stay up that night. I was exhausted, the kind of tired that sits behind your eyes and makes everything feel heavier than it should. But for some reason, sleep just wouldn't come. It started with a sound. At first, I thought I imagined it. Just one of those random noises apartments make at night, pipes, footsteps upstairs, the usual. I turned over, pulled the blanket tighter, and tried to ignore it. Then I heard it again. A soft thud, followed by something quieter. Like movement. Like someone trying not to be heard. That's when I checked the time. 2:17 a.m. And suddenly, I was wide awake. See, the thing is I wasn't living alone. I shared the apartment with Caleb. We'd been roommates for about 6 months. Met through a mutual friend, ended up signing a lease together because rent was insane and we both needed a place fast. At first, it was just practical. Two guys, separate lives, minimal overlap. But somewhere along the way, things got comfortable. Easy. Caleb was the kind of guy people noticed. Tall, built without trying too hard. That messy dark hair that always looked like he'd just run a hand through it. He had this calm confidence about him, like nothing really fazed him. And me? I try not to notice too much. Tried. We'd fall into routines, late-night movies, random conversations in the kitchen, the occasional beer after a long day. Nothing unusual. Nothing that meant anything. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. But that night, that sound coming from his room, it didn't feel normal. I sat up slowly, holding my breath. Another noise. This time clearer. A muffled groan. My stomach tightened. Okay, what the hell? I muttered under my breath. There were a few logical explanations. Maybe he was on a call. Maybe he was sick. Maybe. Another sound cut through my thoughts. Lower. Rougher. Definitely not a phone call. I swung my legs off the bed, hesitating for a second. I knew I should probably just ignore it. Go back to sleep. Pretend I didn't hear anything. But curiosity has a way of getting under your skin. And if I'm being honest, it wasn't just curiosity. It was him. I stepped quietly into the hallway, the floor cool under my feet. The apartment was dark except for the faint glow coming from under Caleb's door. That stopped me. Light. At 2 a.m. And those sounds. I moved closer before I could talk myself out of it. Another soft thud. Then a sharp inhale. My heart started pounding. Caleb. I called out quietly, more to test the situation than anything else. Silence. Complete silence. Like everything on the other side of that door had just stopped. I froze. For a second, I thought maybe I'd imagined all of it. Maybe I was just tired, my brain playing tricks on me. Then I heard movement again, but different this time. Slower. Careful. Like he knew I was out here. Yeah. Caleb's voice finally came through the door, low and steady. Too steady. You okay? I asked, trying to sound casual, even though my pulse was going crazy. A pause. Yeah? What? I leaned slightly closer to the door, not touching it, just standing there. I thought I heard something. Another pause. Longer this time. Then a quiet chuckle. Probably just me moving stuff around. Couldn't sleep. Something about that didn't sit right. Moving stuff around? At 2 in the morning? With those sounds? Right? I said slowly. I should have left it there. I should have just nodded, gone back to bed, and pretended this never happened. But instead, I found myself asking, "You sure?" Silence again. And this time, it felt different. Heavier. Like the air between us had shifted. Then I heard footsteps. Coming closer. My breath caught. The door handle moved. And before I had time to step back, it opened. Caleb stood there, framed by the dim light of his room. Shirtless. Hair slightly messy. Chest rising a little too fast for someone who was just moving stuff around. Our eyes met. And for a second, neither of us said anything. I don't know what I expected, but it definitely wasn't the way he was looking at me. Like I just caught him in something he wasn't ready to explain. Or worse, something he didn't want me to see. "You good, Sean?" he asked, his voice quieter now. Closer. I swallowed, suddenly very aware of how little space there was between us. "Yeah," I said, even though that wasn't entirely true. Just couldn't sleep. He nodded slowly, studying my face like he was trying to figure something out. Or maybe trying to decide something. "Same," he said. Another silence. Longer this time. Tense. And then, "You hear anything else?" he asked. The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" His gaze didn't waver. "Like, before you came out here." There was something in his tone. Subtle, but definitely there. I hesitated. Because the truth? I had heard something. Something I definitely wasn't supposed to. And standing there, looking at him, I had a feeling he knew that. No, I said finally. A lie, and I wasn't sure why I told it. But the second it left my mouth, something in his expression shifted. Not relief. Not exactly. More like interest. Good, Caleb said quietly. And for some reason, that single word made my chest tighten. Because it didn't sound like he was just talking about the noise anymore. It felt like something else had just started. And I had no idea what I had just stepped into. I didn't go back to sleep after that. I tried. I really did. I lay there staring at the ceiling, turning over every second of what just happened like my brain was stuck on repeat. The sounds, his voice, the way he opened the door like that, like he wasn't surprised to see me there. And that question, you hear anything else? Yeah, I heard something. I just didn't say it. I dragged a hand over my face and exhaled slowly, trying to calm down, but my body wasn't listening. My chest still felt tight, like something unresolved was sitting there, pressing against my ribs. Because the truth was, I knew what I heard, or at least I had a pretty good idea. And that made everything complicated. The next morning was weird. Not obviously weird. Not the kind where something big happens and everyone pretends it didn't. It was more subtle than that. Too normal. I walked into the kitchen, and Caleb was already there, leaning against the counter, scrolling on his phone like always. Coffee mug in one hand. Same routine. Morning, he said without looking up. Like nothing happened. Morning, I replied, grabbing a cup just to have something to do. Silence settled between us, but it wasn't the comfortable kind we were used to. It felt loaded. I could feel it sitting there, unspoken. I poured coffee, trying not to look at him, but I was hyper-aware of everything: his presence, the way he shifted his weight, even the sound of his breathing. It was ridiculous. Sleep okay? He asked casually. I almost laughed. Yeah, I lied again. You? He finally looked at me. And there it was again, that same look from last night. Like he was searching for something in my face. Yeah, he said after a second. Eventually. Eventually. That word hit harder than it should have. I nodded, taking a sip of coffee just to break eye contact. This was stupid. We were two grown guys sharing an apartment. Whatever happened last night didn't have to mean anything. People have private lives. People do things behind closed doors. It wasn't my business. So why did it feel like it was? The whole day, I couldn't shake it. I tried distracting myself: work, errands, even going out for a run, but my mind kept drifting back to that moment in the hallway. To him standing there, shirtless, looking at me like that. And the worst part? It wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was something else. Something I wasn't ready to name. That night, I told myself I'd go to bed early. Reset. Forget about everything. But around the same time, 2 a.m., I woke up again. No reason this time. No sound at first. Just awake. I stared into the dark, my heart already beating a little faster, like my body was expecting something before my brain caught up. And then, there it was. A sound. Quieter than before, but unmistakable. I sat up slowly. You've got to be kidding me, I whispered. I should have ignored it. Seriously, I should have. But instead, I got out of bed. Again. This time, my steps were slower. More deliberate. Like I already knew what I was walking into. The hallway felt colder than usual. Or maybe that was just me. I stopped in front of his door, staring at the thin line of light underneath. And then I heard it. Clearer now. A low breath. Followed by something softer. Controlled. Like he was trying to keep it down. My throat went dry. Because now there was no doubt. None. And for some reason, I didn't walk away. I stood there, listening. Heart pounding so loud I was sure he'd hear it through the door. And then, a sharp exhale from inside. My fingers twitched at my side. I don't even know why I did it. Maybe curiosity. Maybe something else entirely. But before I could stop myself, I knocked. Soft, but loud enough. Everything inside went still. Again, that same silence from last night. But this time, it felt heavier. Like I'd crossed a line. Caleb, I said, my voice lower than I expected. No answer. Just the faint sound of movement. Then, yeah, he replied. But this time his voice was different. Rougher. Less controlled. I swallowed. Are you okay? A pause. Longer than it should have been. Yeah. I stared at the door. Sure. Another pause. Then, you keep checking on me, Sean? That wasn't what I expected. My grip tightened slightly at my side. I just heard something. A quiet sound came from inside. Not quite a laugh. Not quite anything I could place. Then his voice again. Lower now. Yeah. My chest tightened. Yeah. Silence stretched between us. And then, "You gonna keep standing out there?" he asked. My breath caught. "What?" Another pause. Then, quieter. "Or are you coming in?" Everything in my body went still. Because that didn't sound like a casual invitation. That sounded like something else entirely. And standing there, in the dim hallway, staring at his closed door, I realized, whatever this was, it wasn't just about noise anymore. For a second, I genuinely thought I misheard him. "Or are you coming in?" The words just hung there, on the other side of the door, in the quiet, in my head. And the worst part? He didn't repeat himself. He just waited, like he knew I heard him, like he knew exactly what he was doing. My hand hovered near the door, but I didn't touch it. Not yet. My heart was beating so hard it almost hurt, like my body was trying to warn me. "Don't do this." But I was already too far in. "Caleb," I started, but my voice came out lower than I expected. "What are you?" "Sean." He cut me off. Not loud, not aggressive, just firm. And somehow that made it worse. "I asked you something." A slow breath left my lungs. "Yeah," he did. And I still hadn't answered. Because answering meant choosing. Walking away. Or stepping into whatever the hell this was. My fingers finally brushed the handle. Cold metal. Grounding. Real. "You're being weird," I muttered, more to myself than to him. A quiet sound came from inside again. That almost laugh. "Am I?" My jaw tightened. This wasn't how we talked to each other. Not usually. There was always this easy rhythm between us, this unspoken understanding. But now, everything felt sharper, more intentional. "Yeah," I said, forcing a steadier tone. "You are." A pause. Then, softer. "Then go back to bed." That should have been it. That should have been my out. Simple. Clean. But instead of stepping away, I stayed. Because even though he gave me the option, it didn't feel like he wanted me to take it. And I don't know what that says about me. But I pushed the door open. Just a little at first. Enough for the light to spill into the hallway. Enough for me to see him. Caleb was sitting on the edge of his bed. Shirtless. Again. But this time, it was different. His shoulders were tense, his hands resting on his thighs like he'd forced himself to stay still. Like he'd been doing something before I knocked, and had to stop. His head tilted slightly when he saw me, eyes locking onto mine immediately. And just like that, everything else faded. The hallway, the late hour, even the fact that this was a terrible idea. "You came in," he said quietly. Not surprised, just stating it. I pushed the door open a little more, stepping inside without fully realizing I'd made that decision. "Yeah," I replied. My voice sounded different in here. Lower. Closer. The door clicked softly behind me when I let it go. Neither of us moved. We just looked at each other. And now that I was actually inside his room, it was impossible to ignore what I'd already figured out. The tension, the way he was breathing, the fact that he definitely hadn't just been moving stuff around. "You want to tell me what's going on?" I asked. I tried to keep it casual. Failed. His gaze didn't waver. "Do you really want me to?" he asked. That question hit harder than it should have. Because it wasn't defensive. It wasn't dismissive. It sounded real. Like he was actually asking. I hesitated. And that was enough for him to notice. Caleb leaned forward slightly, elbows resting on his knees now, his eyes still locked on mine. "You heard me," he said. Not a question. A statement. My throat went dry. Yeah. There it was. No more pretending. No more lying. Just the truth sitting between us. And instead of reacting the way I expected, he nodded. Slowly. Like that confirmed something for him. "Okay," he said quietly. "Okay. That's it. That's all you're gonna say?" I asked, a little sharper than I meant to. His lips twitched. Not quite a smile. "Depends," he said. "On what?" He leaned back slightly this time, one hand dragging through his hair in a way that made my chest tighten for no reason I wanted to admit. "On why you're here." That caught me off guard. "I told you I heard something." He shook his head. "No. That's why you came out the first time." A pause. Then, "This time you knocked." My pulse spiked. Because he was right. And we both knew it. I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Because what was I supposed to say? That I was curious? That I couldn't stop thinking about him? That hearing those sounds again did something to me I didn't fully understand yet? Yeah. No. Instead, I shrugged slightly, trying to play it off. Couldn't sleep. Weak. Even I didn't believe that. Caleb definitely didn't. I could see it in his face. The way his eyes narrowed just slightly. The way his jaw shifted like he was holding something back. "Right," he said. But he didn't push. Not yet. Instead, he stood up, and that small movement, it changed everything. Because now he was closer. Not touching, not even that close, technically, but close enough that I could feel it. That shift in the air, that tension from before, it was nothing compared to this. Sean, he said, quieter now. My name sounded different coming from him like that. Slower. He stepped closer. Just one step. But it was enough. You don't have to lie. I swallowed. I'm not. You are. Not harsh. Just certain. And for some reason, that made it harder to argue. Silence settled between us again. But this time, it wasn't empty. It was full of everything we weren't saying. Everything we were both starting to understand. And then, his hand lifted slightly. Not touching me. Just hovering. Like he was giving me time to stop him. To step back. To walk away. I didn't move. And I think that was the moment everything shifted. Because the second he realized that, something in his expression changed. Not hesitation. Not anymore. Something else. Something heavier. Tell me to stop, Caleb said quietly. My breath caught. Because that wasn't a suggestion. That was a line. And I knew. The second I didn't say anything. We were crossing it. I didn't tell him to stop. And the second that silence stretched just a little too long, Caleb closed the distance. Not fast. Not rushed. Slow. Like he wanted me to feel every inch of it. His hand finally touched me light at first. Just his fingers brushing my arm. Barely there. But it was enough to send a sharp jolt through my entire body. My breath hitched. And he noticed. Of course he did. His eyes didn't leave mine, watching every reaction like he was trying to read something deeper than just what was happening on the surface. Still want me to stop? He asked quietly. I should have said yes. That would have been the smart thing. The safe thing. Instead, I shook my head. Just slightly. But it was enough. Something in his expression shifted again. That last bit of restraint. Gone. His grip tightened just a little, not rough, not forceful, but intentional. Grounding. Real. And suddenly, everything felt too close. Too intense. The room. The air. Him. You're sure? He asked again, softer this time. Like he was giving me one last chance. I swallowed. Yeah. That was it. That was the point of no return. His hand slid up my arm, slower now, more deliberate. Not rushed, not clumsy like he'd thought about this. Like this wasn't new to him, just new with me. My chest tightened. Because that thought, it did something to me. Sean. He said my name again, quieter now. Closer. And before I could even process what I was about to do, I stepped forward. That tiny shift erased whatever space was left between us. And suddenly, we were right there. Face to face. Close enough that I could feel his breath. Close enough that I could see every small detail. His eyes, darker than usual, focused entirely on me. The tension in his jaw. The way his chest rose and fell just a little faster now. Neither of us moved. Not yet. But the moment was already happening. You've been thinking about this, he said. Not a question. My heart slammed against my ribs. What? A faint smirk pulled at the corner of his mouth. Don't do that, he murmured. Not now. My fingers twitched at my sides. Because he wasn't wrong. And we both knew it. I don't know what you're talking about. I tried. Weak. Again. He let out a quiet breath, almost like a laugh, but there was no humor in it. Yeah, you do. Then, softer. You came back. That hit harder than anything else. Because it was true. I did come back. And not because I was worried about him. Not really. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The silence said enough. Caleb's gaze dropped for a second to my lips before coming back up to my eyes. And that tiny movement, it was like a switch flipped. Because suddenly, I couldn't think about anything else. Not the situation. Not the consequences. Just this. Him. Right here. Right now. If I do this, he said quietly, his voice lower than before, I'm not pretending it didn't happen tomorrow. My breath caught. That wasn't what I expected. I thought this would be a mistake. Something we'd ignore later. But he was saying the opposite. He was saying this meant something. And for some reason, that made it harder to walk away. Okay, I said, barely above a whisper. But it was enough. His hand moved again, this time not just resting, not just testing. Holding. Firm at my side, pulling me just slightly closer. And then, he paused. Just for a second. Like he was checking one last time. Like he needed to be sure. I didn't move. Didn't pull back. Didn't say anything. And that was all he needed. Because the next moment, he leaned in. Slow. Close. Close enough that my heart felt like it stopped completely. And then, everything changed. I can't continue that scene in a more explicit direction, but I can keep the story going with the same tension, emotions, and slow burn progression just without graphic detail. The moment didn't explode the way I thought it would. It didn't rush forward or spiral out of control. It settled. Caleb stopped just short of closing the distance completely, like he felt the shift to the weight of what was happening between us, the fact that this wasn't just impulse anymore. His forehead almost touched mine. Almost. His hand was still at my side, steady, grounding, like he was making sure I was still there, still choosing this. Last chance, he murmured. But his voice had changed. It wasn't testing anymore. It was careful. That hit me harder than anything else. Because suddenly, this wasn't about tension or curiosity or whatever had been building the past few days. This was real. And for the first time since I stepped into his room, I hesitated. Not because I wanted to leave, but because I realized I didn't know what happened after this. What it would mean tomorrow. What it would change. Caleb noticed immediately. Of course he did. His grip loosened, not pulling away, just giving me space. You don't have to, he said quietly. And that almost made me step back. Because it reminded me that I could. That this wasn't something happening to me. It was something I was choosing. I let out a slow breath, my hands finally moving, one of them brushing lightly against his arm, almost without thinking. Not pulling him closer. Just there. A small answer. I know, I said. And I meant it. His eyes searched mine for a second longer, like he was making sure I wasn't just saying that. Then he nodded. Once. And this time, when he moved closer, I didn't freeze. I didn't overthink it. I just let it happen. It wasn't rushed. That's the thing I remember most. There was no urgency, no chaos, none of the messy energy I expected. Everything felt intentional, careful, like we were both trying to understand what this was while it was happening. At some point, we pulled back just enough to actually look at each other again. And for the first time since all of this started, Caleb looked unsure. Not in a weak way. Just human. You okay? He asked. I almost laughed. Yeah, I said, shaking my head slightly. You? He exhaled quietly, a faint smile pulling at his lips. Yeah, he said. Just didn't expect this. Same. A small silence settled between us again. But this one felt different. Lighter. Like something had shifted, not just the tension, but the way we were standing there now. Less like roommates. More like something else neither of us had defined yet. I ran a hand through my hair, stepping back just slightly, not to create distance, just to think. So what now? I asked. He watched me for a second, then leaned back against the edge of his desk. Good question. I huffed out a quiet breath. That's helpful. He smirked faintly. Hey, you're the one who knocked. Yeah, and you're the one who told me to come in. Fair. Another pause. But this time, it wasn't tense. Just real. Then Caleb's expression softened a little, the edge from earlier completely gone now. We don't have to figure it out tonight, he said. That made sense. Probably the most reasonable thing either of us had said so far. Still, yeah, I nodded. Yeah, that's probably a good idea. Neither of us moved right away. And I realized I didn't actually want to leave yet. Not because of what just happened, but because of how it felt after. Caleb must have picked up on that too. Stay for a bit, he asked. Simple. No pressure. Just an option. I hesitated for half a second. Then, yeah, we didn't talk about it. Not really. We just sat there for a while, him on the edge of the bed, me leaning back against the wall, the quiet stretching between us in a way that somehow felt easier than before. At some point, the tension faded into something calmer, something steadier. And for the first time since this whole thing started, I wasn't overthinking every second. I was just there, with him. But as the minutes passed, one thought kept creeping back in. Not about what just happened, but about what came next. Because whatever this was, it wasn't something we could ignore. And deep down, I had a feeling this was only the beginning. I didn't expect the next morning to feel heavier. Not awkward exactly, just different. I woke up later than usual, sunlight already pushing through the blinds. And for a second, I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out why my chest felt tight again. Then it hit me. Last night wasn't some blur. It wasn't something I could brush off or pretend didn't happen. It was real. And Caleb was still in the next room. I sat up slowly, running a hand through my hair, already overthinking it. Do I act normal? Do I say something? Do we just ignore it? None of the options felt right. But staying in my room forever wasn't one either. So I got up. The apartment was quiet when I stepped out. Too quiet. For a second, I thought maybe he'd already left, but then I heard it. The faint clink of a mug in the kitchen. Of course. I hesitated in the hallway, just for a moment, then forced myself to move. When I walked in, Caleb was standing at the counter again. Same spot as yesterday morning. Like nothing had changed. Except everything had. He glanced up when he heard me. And for a split second, there it was. That same look from last night. But softer now. Morning, he said. Simple. Careful. Morning. I grabbed a mug, more out of habit than anything else, trying to keep my hands from doing something stupid like fidgeting. Neither of us spoke right away. And this time, the silence wasn't just loaded. It was uncertain, like we were both waiting to see who'd say it first. I poured coffee, stared into the cup longer than necessary, then finally. So last night. Smooth. Real smooth. Caleb let out a quiet breath, almost like he'd been waiting for that. Yeah, he said. I glanced at him. He wasn't looking away, not avoiding it. Just steady. That helped. A little. I leaned back against the counter, crossing my arms loosely. We should probably, I started. Not pretend it didn't happen, he cut in. I blinked. Yeah. A small, almost relieved smile flickered across his face. Good, he said. That caught me off guard. Good. Yeah. He set his mug down, turning to face me fully now. Because I wasn't planning to. Something in my chest shifted. Again. And I didn't know if that made things easier. Or more complicated. Okay, I said slowly. So what are we planning to do? Caleb shrugged slightly, but his eyes stayed on mine. Figure it out. That's not a plan. It's better than pretending. I huffed out a quiet breath, shaking my head. You always this vague? Only when I don't want to mess something up. That made me pause. Because that didn't sound like Caleb the calm, confident guy who always seemed in control of everything. This sounded careful, and that made it feel real in a way I wasn't ready for. You think this is easy for me? I asked. His expression softened a little. No. A beat. I just think it's worth not rushing. That landed. Harder than I expected. Because part of me wanted to rush. To define it, label it, understand it, so I wouldn't have to sit in this weird in-between space. But another part, the quieter part, knew he was right. Yeah, I admitted. Okay. The rest of the day felt strange in a different way. Not tense. Not awkward. Just aware. Every little thing felt amplified. When we passed each other in the hallway. When our hands brushed grabbing something at the same time. When he looked at me just a second too long before looking away. It wasn't uncomfortable. But it wasn't normal either. And I couldn't tell if that was a good thing yet. That night, I told myself I'd just go to sleep. No overthinking. No repeating last night. Just normal. But around midnight, I heard his door open. Soft footsteps. Then the fridge. I stared at my ceiling for a second, debating. Then, seriously, I muttered, already getting up. Caleb was standing in the kitchen when I walked in, pouring water into a glass. He looked up, clearly not expecting me this time. Couldn't sleep, he asked. I leaned against the doorway. Starting to think that's your fault. A faint smirk. I'll take that as a compliment. Don't. But I couldn't help the small smile that slipped through. The air between us felt lighter now. Still charged. Still something there. But easier. He took a sip of water, then glanced at me again. You okay? He asked. That question again. Different tone this time. More genuine. Yeah, I said. Just thinking. Dangerous. Shut up. He chuckled quietly. And for a second, it almost felt like before. Almost. Then the silence stretched again. And this time, neither of us looked away. You coming back to my room tonight? Caleb asked. Just like that. No build-up. No hesitation. My pulse jumped. Wow, I said, raising an eyebrow. Straight to it, huh? He shrugged. Figured we skipped subtle already. I exhaled slowly, crossing my arms. You don't waste time. Not with things that matter. That hit. And he didn't look away after saying it. Didn't play it off. Just let it sit there between us. I swallowed. Caleb. But I didn't finish the sentence. Because I didn't know how. Didn't know what I was about to say. No. Yes. Wait. Instead, I just stood there, looking at him, and realizing this wasn't just about last night anymore. And whatever choice I made next, it wasn't going to be simple. I didn't answer him right away. Not because I didn't know, but because I did. And that made it harder. Caleb didn't rush me. He just stood there, leaning lightly against the counter, watching me in that same steady way he always did, like he could wait as long as it took. And somehow, that made the silence louder. You always do this? I asked finally. Do what? Drop something like that, and just stand there. A faint smirk tugged at his mouth. Only when I mean it. Of course. I let out a slow breath, dragging a hand over my face. This is insane, I muttered. Is it? I looked at him. Really looked this time. And the thing was, he didn't look unsure anymore. Not like this morning. Not like last night, before everything shifted. Now he looked certain. Not pushing. Just clear. And that made it harder to pretend this was just some random thing that happened. Because it wasn't. You're way too calm about this, I said. He shrugged slightly. I've had more time to think about it. That caught me off guard. What? Caleb hesitated for a fraction of a second. Then, I didn't start thinking about this last night, Sean. My chest tightened. Because that meant. How long? I asked. He exhaled quietly, glancing down for a second before meeting my eyes again. A while. A while. That could mean anything. But the way he said it, it wasn't casual. It wasn't recent. And suddenly, a bunch of small moments over the past few months started making a lot more sense. The looks, the pauses, the way he sometimes stood just a little too close. You're serious, I said quietly. Yeah. No hesitation. No joke. Just truth. I swallowed, my thoughts tangling up on themselves. Okay, I said, more to ground myself than anything else. Okay. Caleb pushed off the counter slightly, taking a step closer, not invading my space, just enough to close that invisible distance again. You don't have to decide everything right now, he said. I know, but you do have to decide something. I huffed out a quiet breath. Yeah, I figured that part out. A small silence. Then, what do you want, he asked. That question landed heavier than anything else tonight. Because it wasn't about him. It wasn't about last night. It was about me. And I didn't have a clean answer. Not one I could explain in a single sentence. I don't know, I admitted. Honest. Finally, his expression didn't change. Didn't drop. Didn't tighten. Just stayed steady. Okay, he said. That surprised me. That's it. I asked. For now. I shook my head slightly, a faint, almost disbelieving smile slipping through. You're making this way too easy. No, he said quietly. I'm just not making it harder. Yeah, that hit. The silence that followed felt different again. Less pressure, less expectation, but still something. I pushed myself off the doorway, stepping a little closer without really thinking about it. Come on, I said. His brow lifted slightly. Come on what? You're not the only one who gets to ask questions. A small smirk. Fair. I crossed my arms loosely, studying him. You said you've been thinking about this for a while. Yeah. Why didn't you say anything? He didn't answer right away. And for the first time tonight, he looked slightly unsure again. Because I didn't know if I was reading it wrong, he said. Reading what wrong? You. That caught me off guard. Me? Yeah. He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling quietly. There were moments, he said. Small things. The way you looked at me sometimes, the way you didn't pull away when you could have. My pulse picked up, because I knew exactly what he meant. I just hadn't let myself think about it like that. I didn't want to make it weird if I was wrong, he added. I let out a quiet breath. Too late for that. He laughed softly. Yeah, guess so. Another pause. But this one felt warmer. Like we were finally on the same page. Not with answers, but with honesty. I looked at him for a long second. Then, yeah, I said. He stilled slightly. Yeah, what? I met his eyes. I'm coming back to your room. The words came out calmer than I expected. Clearer. And the second they did, something in his expression shifted again. Not surprise. Not relief. Just something deeper. Okay, he said quietly. No hesitation. No teasing. Just that. This time, when we walked down the hallway, it felt different. Not like I was being pulled into something I didn't understand, but like I was choosing it, step by step. And as Caleb reached his door, pushing it open and glancing back at me, I realized something. This still wasn't simple. It still didn't have a clear ending, but it wasn't confusing in the same way anymore. Because now, I knew I wasn't the only one in this. And for the first time since all of this started, that felt enough. The second time felt different the moment we stepped into his room. Not because of what we were about to do, but because of what we already knew. There was no hesitation at the door this time. No standing in the hallway, overthinking every possible outcome. No pretending this was just curiosity or a one-time thing. We'd already crossed that line. Now, we were choosing what came after it. Caleb closed the door behind us, quieter than before. Not careful, just aware. I leaned back slightly against it, exhaling like I didn't realize I'd been holding my breath the whole walk down the hallway. He didn't move right away, just stood there, watching me. And for a second, it almost felt like everything slowed down again, not in that tense, uncertain way from before, but something steadier. "You sure?" he asked. Same question, different meaning. This time, it wasn't about the moment. It was about all of it. I looked at him, really looked, and realized something I hadn't let myself admit until now. I wasn't confused anymore. Maybe I didn't have everything figured out. Maybe I didn't know exactly what this was going to become. But I knew I didn't want to walk away from it. "Yeah," I said. No hesitation. And I meant it. What followed wasn't rushed. It wasn't messy or overwhelming or anything like the scenarios I'd built up in my head. It felt grounded, like we were both there for the same reason now. Not just tension, not just curiosity, but something real starting to take shape between us. At some point, we ended up sitting instead of standing closer than before, but not trying to fill every inch of space. Just there. And weirdly enough, that's when it hit me the hardest. Not the physical closeness, but how easy it felt to just exist next to him like this. "You're quiet," Caleb said after a while. I huffed a small breath. "Just thinking. Still dangerous." "Shut up," I muttered, but there was no edge to it. He smiled faintly, then nudged my arm lightly. "What's going on in your head?" I hesitated, then decided. If we were doing this, I wasn't going to keep half of it to myself. "This isn't what I expected," I said. Yeah. I glanced at him. Thought it'd be more complicated. He tilted his head slightly. "It is complicated." "Yeah, but not in a bad way." That made him pause. And for the first time since we came in, he looked like he was actually processing that. "Not in a bad way," he repeated quietly. I shook my head. "No." A small silence followed that. But it didn't feel empty. It felt like something settling into place. We didn't define anything that night. No labels. No big decisions. Just honesty. And that turned out to be enough. At some point, I stood up, stretching slightly, the reality of the time finally catching up with me. "I should probably get some sleep," I said. Caleb nodded, standing up too. "Yeah." Neither of us moved toward the door immediately. And I realized, I didn't want this to feel like an ending. Like I was walking out, and we'd reset everything in the morning. "So," I started. He looked at me. "So," he echoed. I hesitated for half a second. Then, "This isn't a one-time thing, right?" There it was. The question I'd been avoiding. The one that actually mattered. Caleb didn't answer right away. But when he did, "No," he said. Simple, clear, certain. And something in my chest eased instantly. "Good," I said, before I could overthink it. A faint smile pulled at his lips. "Good," he repeated. I moved toward the door, then paused, glancing back at him. "Try not to wake me up again tonight," I said. He raised an eyebrow slightly. "No promises." I shook my head, but I was smiling. "Idiot. Didn't hear you complaining earlier." "Yeah, okay. Good night, Caleb." "Night, Sean." Back in my room, I finally lay down and let everything settle. The past 2 days replayed in pieces, not chaotic, not overwhelming anymore. Just clear. And for the first time since this whole thing started, I didn't feel confused. I didn't feel like I was trying to catch up to something I didn't understand. I just felt calm. Because whatever this was, it wasn't finished. It wasn't defined. But it was real. And for now, that was enough.